So I took him home and he was fine for about 30 days. Then he wasn't. He went from extremely docile to like he would sometimes attack me. If you made him go out of his comfort zone, he would rear and like come at you.
Do you feel like you were misled?
I talked to the owner and the trainer, and my first thing was safe.
I'm here with Kristen, and you just brought your bay horse here, and hopefully we're going to leave him for some training. And can you just tell us a little bit about why you brought him here?
He was a jumper horse. I had another horse in training with a trainer about 2 years ago, and while I was up visiting that horse in training, I was considering buying another one and selling that horse. I kept seeing this horse because he was in training quite a few months, but what I was looking for was not this horse.
Yeah, he's pretty eye-catching though, isn't he?
Yes,
Yeah,
it was safe, mare, and probably bay. So
Okay.
I got bay. He's like, you ask about him every time, you ask about him every time, just ride him. I got on him and total impulse buy. I rode him for 20 minutes and I didn't buy him that day.
And the ride went well?
The ride went really well.
Yeah.
And he was fine for about 30 days.
Okay.
And then he wasn't. He really came to life. He went from extremely docile to like he would sometimes attack me. He was very, very dominant about the food. I could handle that one. And if I was stressed, like he can feel it a lot, which is probably why he's dancing around right now. He would get, like, kind of tell me he didn't like that, and then he'd kind of dance around, and then if you made him go out of his comfort zone, he would rear and, like, come at you. But
he'd rear up and kind of strike at you?
Yes, with both feet, like, pound, like, not just one, like both.
Wow.
I decided he needed time off, so my intention was always to give him some time off, but now it's turned into a lot of time off. He ended up having ulcers, and so I treated him at the vet for ulcers. And
Do you feel like you were misled by the person you bought him from?
I talked to the owner and the trainer, and my first thing was safe. So he was safe when I rode him at their house.
I see that's bringing up some emotions for you. So you
Yes.
do kind of feel like they probably left some things out of the story. And
yes, because now I don't want to say the owner's name, but now it's Karen's horse. Oh, that's Karen's horse? That's not her real name.
Yeah.
Oh, that's Karen's horse? Oh, you have him? Or, oh, you got a spree? And I don't even know. I still to this day don't know all the details because I don't
what's
think
happened,
I
what's
want
in his
to.
past. Yeah.
On your Patreon page where, you say you have your checklist. I kind of want you to go through your checklist and tell me, because I try, but I'm not even a fraction of the horseman that you are, so I want you to look at him and tell me, where to go to before I just jump back on.
There he goes.
Yeah.
He's relaxing a little bit. So I believe the checklist that you're referring to is the fundamental series. And so that's a series that I've kind of boiled down to things that are just essential for every horse to know, and that's on our Patreon page. So if you're interested in seeing that series, you guys can go check that out on there. It's just the core fundamentals of the basics that, again, every horse needs to know. So we'll definitely be going through that with him, and that's basically a lot of the groundwork that we'll be doing with him. Get him used to steady pressure, rhythmic motion, rhythmic pressure, seeing where he's at, accepting that. Anybody that's been watching my channel knows it's not about just getting on and riding him, and that's kind of what you did a little bit, is you had some people just ride him, but there's a difference between getting to their mind and helping them get more emotionally fit and more comfortable with things, and also them understanding pressure. And, and that's what I feel like he's missing a bit, is some of those things. And so we'll definitely get that sorted out on the ground before we go to riding.
And I think a lot of
and then even when we're riding, then it's about getting him to understand his responsibilities in the saddle, and that's ultimately what helps a horse be more safe. What I also need to know from him is innately how much horse does he want to be. Like there's kind of a scale of like 1 to 10. 1 is like Tony the Pony, anybody can ride them. They're just gentle and safe, and they're innately that way, and also they have the experience and stuff to back that up. Then there's like a 5, which is kind of where most people are kind of in, is that horse is between a 4 and a 6. Like a lot of horses kind of fit in that category where just some training and some experience, some knowledge of the person riding them, they're going to get along okay. Once you get to 7s and above, they're kind of a lot of horse, and you got to warm them up right. They got to have a lot of experience going into it. They're going to take somebody more knowledgeable, like intermediate or above rider, to get along with them and that sort of thing. So that's where us being able to work with him over a little bit more time is going to be helpful to really understand where he's at with all that. So I'm just switching halters here. This is just one that's one of mine that I'm comfortable with. It's got the ring, makes it a little easier to tip their nose.
Is mine off?
And a little bit longer lead rope, 14-foot lead rope in case any rearing happens. I think I'm gonna start with the flag. I like the flag because in case he does start rearing or something, it's a little bit more energy. I can keep him out of my space here. But one of the first things I want to address is him. I want him to get a little bit calmer, and so I'm going to do a few hindquarter yields, and I want him to understand and respect our space a little bit more. That is just one of my pet peeves. I want them to be easy to handle on the ground and not think they can just barge through our space. I kind of want that first, and then I want them to get comfortable, but we have to be safe through this process initially. And if he gets bothered by something, running us over is definitely going to be his go-to. So like right there when he starts crowding in, I'm just going to wave that stick there and just say, hey, you could step off there and you could go somewhere else. Like I'm not restricting him from moving. You can go somewhere else, but you can't be on top of me. And that's just going to be the baseline that we're going to go with from here. And sometimes I do a whole session on that and just work on that. But with him, I think I'm just going to give him some reminders as we go there. So when a horse is nervous, one of the first parts of their body that I'm going to want to get control over is the hindquarters and yielding the hindquarters. That's kind of turning the motor off on a horse. And it's also the opposite of rearing. If he's disengaging the hindquarters, he's not engaging them to rear. So engaging them to rear rearing is a very engaging thing for the hindquarters. And so you can diffuse a lot of that just by riding and asking him to bend his ribs or playing with him on the ground. The other thing that I'm going to gain from yielding the hindquarters is I end up with two eyes facing me. And so I'm building a connection where instead of him, us kind of being a post that's kind of holding on to him, we're now the sweet spot where he can stay connected with us. And that's what we're relying on when we haul him somewhere new, is the connection between him and I. So it's like, or him and you when you do it. And the idea is that you go somewhere new, everything else is brand new, but we don't have to go look at everything because he's with me. I'm still here, I'm consistent, we're gonna do the same things that we do at home. And that's kind of when you show a horse or you take him to a trail ride somewhere, take him to a clinic, that's what you're hoping to kind of rely on to have the same horse. I like how quickly he responded to that leadership. Right away he's like, okay, yep, I'll step off.
And when I'm nervous or upset, like he feeds off of it. So
yes.
Now that I'm away, like he's probably going to be way different because a little shy on the camera and everything.
Yeah, and that's I try to be calm and relaxed with them, and you're 100% spot on there. Horses are designed to synchronize their heartbeat with the herd of horses. So if one horse's heart rate goes way up, all the horses. And so there's actually, I don't know if it's chemistry or biology that's going on, but they don't just, it's not just a thing that people think is true. Like you cannot fake it around a horse. Either you're calm or you're not, and the horse is going to react differently. And you guys at home maybe have experienced that with your horse, where horses wake up on different side of the stalls, each day, or different side of the pasture. But we are too. If we've had a long day at work, had some stressful things happen, and we're rushed, we can bring that into our session, and we got to try to check that at the gate and be in the moment and as present with us as possible. Easier said than done, but it's definitely a very big part of horsemanship. For me, it's not being in a hurry. A lot of times I got a bunch of things I'm trying to do with different horses, and I try to just relax and just take my time with each horse and be present with them. But if you're nervous around them, you can't fake that. And so that's something that's going to be important with putting you and him together. If you're riding him and he's being good, but you're nervous, it's not going to work out great. You have to trust him and be comfortable on him. Otherwise, yes, because you have to be the leader for your horse. And so if the leader's nervous, well, then that's indicating to him he needs to be nervous and be looking for something too. And so we have to be able to give horses good leadership so that they trust us. And that's why we gain leadership. Our horse can turn loose. Oh, see that? That was really nice. He's like, yep, stay out of that space. So I really like that he's responsive. That kind of indicates how smart he is. But we proved to them that we're the leader by, so there he got a little defensive about that. He's like, I don't know what that is, and kind of got a little bit unsure of it there.
He'll kind of snarl and like grind his teeth and nip the air, and then the next step he'll come like towards you or whatnot.
I like that he's not too afraid of it. That's good. But them seeing us as the leader is just a really critical part, because if we're just their friend, then we don't have anything to rely on if we get in a situation where something else is scaring them. But if they see us as the leader, then they can rely on us for that security and comfort, even though something else that they're not familiar with is scaring them. Like on a trail ride, cars go by or bicycles go by, or a hiker with their dog, or you're at a show and there's a lot going on and the speaker system's going and banners on the rail and just all kinds of scary things. And what's interesting is if we're trying to prove to the horse that we're the leader, we want to move their shoulder more. We want to get control over the... See, I'm going to create a little boundary right there too. So even though I was moving his shoulder because he kind of crowded through my space, I'm just going to kind of set a boundary with that flag. And the flag's going to stay quiet as long as he's out there at a distance. Now, he made a good choice there to yield his hindquarters and step off. It's not what I asked him to do, but that's what I previously did, and so we're going to let him process that. If a horse will give me the opportunity to just release them and let them process what's happening, I love that. That's great. Sometimes they're moving so much that you have to keep redirecting them until they can get calm enough to process, but processing time is really, really important for them. So you can see the wheels turning, his ears are going. He goes, this guy's doing this a little different, you know, because it's a balance between I want to test him and push his buttons a little bit to make sure he's going to be safe, but I need to establish some relationship skills here between the two of us. Of some you do this, I'm going to do that. But if you are calm and you're relaxed and you're cooperating with me, I'm going to be calm and relaxed with you too. And I'm not just. It's not. A lot of people talk about we move their feet to get to their mind. And that's true, like we're going to control their body to get to their mind, but I'm more interested in just getting to their mind. So I'm really, I'm trying to get to his mind the whole time. And so sometimes that can be just standing still. And if they're having a good thought and processing good information at that time, you're better off doing nothing versus continuing to push buttons. Now, I yielded his hindquarters away again and then backed up and gave me space. That is the answer. And so I'm choosing to value that answer above circling or anything else. He crowded me. I put a little pressure on. He chose to stop and back up and not circle anymore. That's the thought I want. I want him to understand giving me space, because that was the opposite of what we were having at the beginning. This is where it gets a little complicated of why it's like good to have somebody like me that's done this thousands of times with horses. To do it, because you might say, well, you were just asking him to circle and now you're letting him stop, but it's because I'm prioritizing him getting to this state of mind over circling. It's like circling is not the problem. Getting him to stand still and relax and give us space was the original issue that we were having. Just trying to talk to you about him. Now that was different. Do you see how he stepped off my space as he moved off there? Now, he doesn't see this as the relief of me approaching him with a stick, but one of my goals will eventually be that he's going to realize when I turn my energy off and try to approach him, that this is actually where the relief is. So I decided to stop there when he quit backing up, and I'll draw him back in. But you'd like a horse to get to where you can rub them with your tools and they can see that as the relief. Right now, he sees this as a little bit of pressure. And that's one of the things of him understanding rhythmic motion. He's got to understand that better, because the hole here, you can't see it, but the hole is he's not matching my energy up and down. He needs to realize and learn that when I get the driving look on my face, like when another horse pins their ears and pushes them away, that means I'm asking him to move and yield. When I turn that off and I just approach him, even if there's the flag out, he needs to go to read me, not the flag. And everybody wishes that this statement were true. The statement is, if you're calm, your horse is calm. I'd be like out of a job if that was true. If all it took was you being calm and your horse would be calm, then that would be amazing, right? But the truth is you have to train them to read you, to get in harmony with you. And so that's kind of what we're doing now, is we're training him that when I'm calm, he can be calm, even if the flag isn't calm. Even if the dog is barking, even if there's traffic, even if there's high wind, even if something else is going on, that he can get in tune with the human versus reacting to outside stimulus. That was better. So he's trotting around there, his head's up a bit high, he's kind of snorting. We'd like him to get in the habit of, when he circles, to kind of go ahead and get relaxed and lower his head. So now I'm going to be a little bit pickier about asking him to keep circling and circle with a little bit of softness. There we go. So you can see when I try to bend him, he gets a little bit defensive there. That's a little better. But when a horse gets a little nervous or a little anxious, their ribs get stuck, and you can hear, I don't know if you guys can hear it in the mic, but he's got some really shallow breathing. You can hear it and see it. And they do that when they're holding tension there. And so doing a lot of lateral work, either bending on a circle or side passing or shoulders in, that helps them kind of turn loose to that, and they can relax and kind of settle, recover a little bit. So, and if just asking him to go on a circle kind of gets him a little revved up, like there's quite a bit of work to do here, you know. So I just put that little partial disengagement into the circle. See, I'm saying don't crowd me, and circle with a little bend. I'm interested in a little bit of flexion with his head and neck, but I'm very interested in him doing that, a little partial disengagement in the hindquarters. Because a horse has to mentally be vulnerable enough to do that for you. That's not something they can just give you easily. An example that I use all the time is if you first get a halter on a Mustang and you try to walk a circle around them, they'll pivot on their haunches and step their front end around, which is usually a more advanced move than a hindquarter yield, but it's a big success when that horse will finally step over with their hindquarters and turn loose, because they just want to keep them engaged, ready to run off if they get scared. And so it's just basic fundamentals of how horses kind of think. The other thing, I was thinking about saying this off camera, but I'm just going to say it while we're on camera here. The other thing, that this is a very subjective thing for me to evaluate him, work with him for a while, and then be like, yeah, he's right. It's not a question of, is he the right horse for you, isn't he? It's going to end up being, how much work do you want to put into it? There's going to be a level of training that's there to teach him and give you a leg up on everything. But I can tell he's kind of a lot of horse without, just the way he unloaded and how he was standing around versus the gray horse. Like he's probably a 6 or a 7, and the gray horse is probably like a 4 or a 5. Like right off the bat, just glance, like snapshot picture. And why I'm saying this on camera, what I want you to think about is like, how much work do you want to put into this? Because a big question of whether or not somebody's successful with a horse is how much time is a person able and willing to put into it, and how much how much of a journey are you wanting to go on with developing your horsemanship skills to be able to work with a horse like this safely, and so that's just something to kind of be thinking about as you go, given that he is the kind of the more of the Ferrari type. And that's kind of more for you to decide, more than it is for me to decide. My job is to kind of push his buttons and find out where he's at and help him to understand some of these fundamentals, so that you have some recovery strategies and some go-to things that if he does get bothered, you can go back and rely on. But once he's back in your care, there's a level of continuation that needs to happen there. Sure. It's not just horses are learning every day.
I'm actually fine with going slow and having a journey. I just want to make sure I know exactly what to do to him, because every person I've tried to work with has had a different theory of what he needs. So
yeah, and that's a good point. I don't like to brag on my what I do, or think I know everything. I learn every single time I play with a horse, and every different customer that I work with, and it's never-ending learning. But I've done this with thousands of horses. And I point that out because in the comments there's a lot of experts. and sometimes people can work with one horse at home, and their horse did a similar behavior, and then they know everything about it, or they've trained 10 horses, or they've trained 100 horses, or 1,000 horses. Well, I was just visiting with a friend of mine named Doug Jordan. I've done this 12,000 hours, 13,000 hours, maybe more than that, maybe 15,000 hours. He's done this like hundreds of thousands of hours with horses. Like there's levels to the experience, and that's part of why you get such a range. You know, there is no rule book on horse training, and that's why there can be a really big range of advice and things given. But you've come to the right spot for for getting the recommendations. Just based on, I'm not attached to whatever the outcome is. I'm interested in understanding where he's at and where you're at, and kind of explaining to best of my knowledge what that means, you know, to put you guys together. But my answers are based off of thousands of horses, which is very different than tens of horses or hundreds of horses.
Mm-hmm. And the one I broke my ankle on is similar to him. So it.
Yeah, and that's the other quotient of this is, horses aren't unicorn. You know, there's no unicorns out there, and you know I could train him for 2 years for you, and he's still not going to be a unicorn at the end where he's just perfect. And so the question also for you is like, if he does something that you didn't want him to do, a spook or a brace or something, would you be able to stay left-brained and stay relaxed and work him through that? Versus, you know, I'm not going to put you on him until I think he's pretty safe with what we're doing. But there's going to be times where they make mistakes, and that's the question of when he makes a mistake, how big of a mistake is it? And then the question is, can you stay left brain and maintain your leadership role for him? Because he needs you to be that for him. And that's something that if you're on him and I'm not on him, it's based on you and how you handle that situation. All right, so we're going to leave this alone for a little bit here. So that was some rhythmic pressure and some rhythmic motion. Now we're going to do some steady pressure yields, and I kind of just want to see our response. I led him from the trailer to the pens where we were at, and one of the things I didn't like was how heavy he felt off the halter. I'm really big on getting them to give you a light feel off that, and so we're going to play with that a little bit. And now, granted, if the horse is nervous, it's going to be harder for them to give to pressure, so he's already feeling way better, like totally different on how he feels now. Now, a little test that's an easy one. I have some like easy steady pressure yields, like lateral flexion, head down. See, this one's interesting. With a horse that's been rode as much as he has, and I'm pressing my thumb right here where a leg cue would be, this should be a very obvious answer. And he acts like he's never heard of it before. And that's, my thing is, I want horses to very clearly understand pressure. And that can be steady pressure, it can be rhythmic pressure. And to me, he doesn't very clearly understand pressure.
No, I agree with that, and especially, I didn't know exactly how much to get into, but he, at the trot, I feel like I have to drive every step, but at the canter, trot should be easier to ride than canter, but canter is much easier for him. He has a motor, and
I think with jumping horses, they canter a lot.
They do.
So he probably has more experience cantering.
But when you have a lot of, like, the leg on to try to do more, you know, the trot, you have to push him like every step basically. Yeah. And he seems to resent that, honestly, but he doesn't carry it himself with responsibility either. Yeah, he's striking me as relatively sensitive, but he doesn't seem to have as much go as I thought he was going to, which can be a big deciding factor on how much horse they are. If they have a lot of go, they're usually a harder horse because most people don't really want to go that fast or aren't confident to let them go and move their feet the way they need to. And so more introverted horses tend to be better if somebody is a little bit unconfident in their riding. So he seems like he kind of wants to do that, like he doesn't want to just take off and run around everywhere. One of the tests I was just doing with him while you were explaining that is head down and back up. And this just adds a second variable to the... I've done head down, but I don't do that together. Yes, and that's putting it together, it makes it more complicated. Mm-hmm. And so they have to have a better understanding of it. So it's a little harder yield. Now I'm going to keep his head down and try to come forward. And again, these are just steady pressure tests. Like, can you move your feet while keeping your head down and not getting bracy? There we go. And he's responding to it very well. If a horse had like a strong pullback issue or really resistant to steady pressure, that could be a spot where they get reactive. There, he's having a nice blowout there.
He stepped off the pressure there really well. And I'll kind of rub him to a stop here. He's having a good release here, you see that? And this is what it's about. It's like for him, it was more about getting him into a good frame of mind. As soon as I called him out on pushing through my space, he had some habits of crowding through the circle, but he kind of turned loose to it right away. He wasn't really committed to it. And so what that ends up being is it's a little less on him and more about previous handling and experiences or lack of these kind of tests or challenges with him. So he's responding to it very well. But again, the overall thing is for a training session is leaving them in a better place than you started. And you can see he's just getting more and more settled and comfortable as we go here. That sand looks kind of inviting, doesn't it? And so you can see, instead of him being defensive and having that little worried look on his face, now he's thinking about rolling, thinking about playing with the rope. Like his left brain side is coming out a little bit more now. And that would be good news if he can kind of turn loose to this more and more. So I'm getting more optimistic as we go here. He's just responding to these things in an appropriate way that we would want him to indicate that he's maybe more gentle than I thought he was initially. Okay. Because horses' dispositions, or not dispositions, but their kind of personality is made up of their innate disposition, and that's where we're talking about that scale of 1 to 10. Then it's learned behavior. What do they know to this point, good and bad, that all factors in. And then how much are they influenced by the environment, and so he was influenced by the environment when he first got here, and then he sounds like he knows some things he didn't need to know. But he knows some positive things as well, and so that's kind of making that up. Good boy. But I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'm going to put him in a little bit more of a bind here. Going to do one more test with this. So this is just like a little bit of a bind where I'm going to put this all the way around him here and see if he can figure his way out of it. So a lot of these techniques are in my fundamental series that are kind of gone through step by step and explaining how to do each one and what you're looking for. So now this is about him figuring out the puzzle, not me pulling him around there. Is he pretty good with the farrier?
He is, yes.
That's good. And that was perfect response. Worked his way through that nicely. Have you done that one with him? Mm-hmm. All right. Good job. You've been doing your homework. I like it. Now I'll just do a couple of lariat rope tests here. So this is just building off that steady pressure idea a little bit more. So again, you can see something new here. He's like, I'm not sure about that. But I like that he's retreating away versus running through the pressure. That's good. Wouldn't mind if what would be an even better response is for him to get curious about it and say, well, what's that? Versus, what are you going to do to me next? And that's one of the goals that we'll have as we expose him to new tools or things, is getting him to switch over to be curious versus defensive as his first response. But you can see when we do something new, he's got a little bit of what are you going to do to me kind of feel. And all it doesn't take a person being mean or harsh or cruel to him in any way. It just takes somebody not having permission to keep going, and they just keep going without, and then the horse will try to give and they just keep going instead of releasing, and balancing that. So there's some times that I kept going, but as soon as he got quieter and tried to understand what I was doing, then I retreated and took it away. And that's what builds kind of that relationship and connection between the horse and the human, versus just asking them to tolerate a bunch of things and just doing it and doing it and doing it. And that's also why I don't try to stop him from backing. I haven't done anything to say don't back up. It's like I want him to know that he has permission to express that. And what happens is if you do that, if you have that mentality, whether you're riding him on a loose rein or you're doing it in this scenario, it diffuses it. It keeps it from escalating. It's when you don't give them an out. Like imagine you went to the doctor or the dentist or something and they strapped you down in the chair and said, all right, here we go. And it's like you cannot leave if you don't want to, or you can't say stop if it gets too uncomfortable. Well, you're gonna be way more scared and freaked out with something that's gonna be more uncomfortable than if you feel like I can leave if I want to. I'm choosing to be here or do whatever you're doing. So whenever a horse is doing something with me, I want them to feel like they have a choice in it, whether it's trailer loading or getting saddled or putting the layer rope on him. It's like, if you feel like you need to move, I want you to know you can move. And if we completely take away that option for them, it can be a much more significant reaction to it than if they have a choice there. It's like, that's new. So I'm just asking him to wear the pressure there, just putting different feels on different places, see how he responds. Some horses are more defensive in different parts of their body. Sometimes it's the head and neck, sometimes it's the ear, sometimes it's the hind leg, sometimes it's their rib cage. There, he's licking and chewing, getting calm. So I like how quickly he solves through these puzzles. He's doing a good job of trying to understand what's going on. Now we're going to sign him up a little bit more. I'm going to put it on a hind leg. And in this one, and the other one, I'm just asking them to wear it. In this one, I'm going to ask him to stop from it or yield to that pressure. And this is, to me, a really important fundamental for a horse to know of giving to steady pressure, whether it's just, I mean, when a horse is contained in fencing, doing vet or farrier care, just, you name it, them getting comfortable with steady pressure at deeper levels is just a really critical thing for them to have in their understanding. So I'm just going to let them wear it here a little bit. You can see I don't have gloves on, I'm just pinching it with 2 fingers. It's not a big deal. Sometimes they get dramatic about it, but
he actually used to be like incredibly defensive about anything around his legs, and so I worked with it a little bit with a lead rope, but not quite the same way that you're doing it.
Yeah, the layer rope, because it tightens on their leg, usually that's what it kind of, I call it signing them up. It kind of gets them, it's more scary when it tightens, that feeling. But if they work through it, they understand it at a deeper level. So it's a great place to start. Like if he was a weanling here that had only been led around by the halter or something, well, we'd start with a lead rope on his leg and work up. You know, you don't just go right for this. But when they're older and they've already done a lot of things, they've already had the fair, you know, work with him a bunch. They've already had their legs, you know, he's had his feet picked up a million times. That's how I kind of decide when to go for a little more. So it's perfect that you already set him up for success with a lead rope. You see, he's still thinking about that. There, he let it out, breathe out. So you got to give him that time to process. But what I like is, I don't worry so much about the reaction. It's more how long did they react for, and then how quickly did they recover afterwards. That's my indicator of how good were they at working through that. You know, if they get really locked up and or stay committed to it for a long time, that's when it's challenging. And then if it's challenging that day, then when I feel like I finish on a good spot, then my next thing is, do I start from scratch again tomorrow, or you know, are they much better? And that's the kind of next indicator to how committed they are to whatever behavior they're doing. Super. Good boy. So he figured that out really well. So at this point, I'm pretty optimistic with how well he's understanding things and getting through stuff. Meaning he wants to be good. You know, he wants to try and understand what we're doing, and but he probably needs a little bit more of a thorough foundation on things. So yeah, I think that'll be a good spot for today. But to me, he looks rideable at this point. Like, I wouldn't be too concerned about trying to ride him. So those of you watching the video, let me know in the comments if you guys want to see the next session where we ride this horse and see how that goes. Or if you guys are good with just seeing some groundwork and move on to the next one. So can you give us your thoughts on that first session with him?
I think he did really good. I like how he is calmed down, and I can see, you know, some things I've been doing, some fundamentals with him, but I don't think I give him enough of the process time.
Okay, you
So,
kind of go from one thing to the next a little
like,
quicker.
I think I'm giving them time, but then I actually videoed it myself, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's way too short.
Okay.
So I might rush them a bit, and the thing that's going to be hard for me is like at home when everything's perfect, you know, we're fine.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as like I'm nervous here, or sometimes you know, taking them to the vet, or my kids running around when I'm trying to have the farrier, or that kind of stuff, like keeping my energy down, because
Yep.
all horses respond, but
Yeah.
he's a bigger response.
Yeah.
So that's going to be my
Yeah. So you're realizing
tough
that'll be a
thing.
really important.
And I kind of already knew it, but I think
Yeah.
it's a little bit more than I thought. So it's just easy when we're in the routine of home. You know, he's fine. I mean, I say he's fine on the ground, but of course he's not all the way fine, or I wouldn't have brought him here. You know, especially to get to the point of riding him. Like, I'm not definitely totally comfortable.
Yeah.
I think if I hadn't have, you know, fallen off and had such a big break, I would have just jumped on him and been, you know, a lot more confident about it. But
I also
we'll
think
see if we can get to
if
that.
you were saddling him, attacking him up, and leading him around the way he's acting now compared to how he was acting earlier, that also can feel a lot better. It's like when you know and you have a plan of knowing what to do, and okay, I'm going to do, like, by the end of me working with him, I'll have a really clear picture of, okay, if he does this, this is what you're going to do. And I usually only have 2 or 3 go-to strategies for different scenarios, not 10 or 20.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps it simple for them, and it keeps it simple for you. I think that'll hopefully give you more confidence and certainty on what to do. It's like a lot of times we get unconfident when we don't know what to do when they're acting a certain way. But if you have a plan and he already knows the pattern, then they respond to it very well as well. So looking forward to working with him more and seeing what we get into.
Very good. Thank you very much.